I remember standing in the middle of a living room in a beautiful house in Savannah. The sunlight was streaming through the curtains, hitting the dust motes in the air. I was 72 years old, and I was staring at a pile of laundry on the sofa. Men's dress shirts, all wrinkled, just sitting there. The man I'd been seeing for 3 months, a retired judge named Julian, walked in. He didn't look at the laundry. He didn't look at me. He just leaned over, kissed my cheek, and said, "Oh, thank goodness you're here. I don't know how I would have managed the house this week without you. You just have a way of making everything right." And in that moment, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning, because I realized that Julian didn't love me. He loved the way I erased his chaos. He didn't want a partner. He wanted a ghost, someone who could move through his house, fix his mistakes, and keep his life running without ever making a sound. My name is Eleanor Vance. I'm 76 now. I spent 42 years of my life as a wife to a man I adored, and for 42 years I believed that my value was measured by how little my husband had to worry about. I thought that was what love was. I thought being the invisible glue that held a family together was a badge of honor. But today, I want to tell you the truth about that glue, because if you spend your whole life holding everything together, eventually you realize you're the only thing that's actually fallen apart. I married my husband, George, in 1965. George was a wonderful man, a civil engineer, brilliant, kind, and steady. But George lived in a world of blueprints and bridges, and I lived in the world of the small things. The small things are the things no one notices until they stop happening. I mean the remembering that his mother's birthday was on the 14th. I mean knowing exactly how he liked his eggs, over easy but with the edges crisp. I mean the way I'd secretly renew his car registration, buy his Christmas gifts for his siblings, and make sure there was always a clean white shirt ready for Monday morning. For 4 decades, I was the chief operating officer of our lives, and like most women of my generation, I didn't call it work. I called it taking care of my man. Now, George never demanded these things. He didn't stand over me and tell me to do the laundry. It was worse than that. He just assumed. He assumed the house stayed clean by magic. He assumed the calendar filled itself. He assumed that the emotional labor of our entire social circle, the thank you notes, the hospital visits, the holiday planning, just happened. I remember one Tuesday, about 10 years before George passed, I was sitting in the kitchen. I had just finished folding the towels, scrubbing the floor, and organizing the mail. I looked at my hands, and I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd done something just because I wanted to. Not because someone needed it, not because it had to be done, just because it made me feel alive. I felt a sudden sharp panic. I realized that if I disappeared tomorrow, George would miss me terribly, but he would mostly miss the way his life was managed. He wouldn't know how to find his own socks, but he'd be devastated that the manager was gone. George passed away in 2012, a sudden heart attack. 1 minute he was there, and the next, the silence in our house was so loud it felt like a physical weight. I grieved him with everything I had, but after a year, something strange happened. I started to enjoy the silence. For the first time in 40 years, the calendar was empty. There were no appointments to schedule for anyone but me. I didn't have to think about anyone's blood pressure, anyone's favorite dinner, or anyone's mood. I felt a lightness in my chest that terrified me. I felt guilty for it. I thought, am I a bad person for enjoying the fact that I don't have to serve someone every day? But then the loneliness crept in, and like so many women my age, I decided to try dating again. I was 71. I thought I was stepping into a new chapter, a chapter of companionship, of intellectual connection, of shared sunsets. But here is the lesson I had to learn the hard way. Many men of our generation don't enter retirement, they just look for a new employee. The first man I dated was Arthur. Arthur was a retired banker, polished and sophisticated. He took me to the opera. He spoke 4 languages. I thought I'd hit the jackpot, but within 2 months, the shift happened. It starts small, a comment like, "I can never find my keys. You're so much better at organizing than I am." Or, "I've never really known how to use the dishwasher. Would you mind showing me?" Suddenly, I wasn't going on dates. I was conducting home inspections. I found myself at Arthur's house, cleaning out his fridge, organizing his tax documents, and reminding him to take his cholesterol medication. I was falling back into the old rhythm. The invisible glue was starting to stick again. I woke up one morning and realized I was spending 4 days a week at his house, and I hadn't read a book in a month because I was too busy managing Arthur's life. I felt that same exhaustion, that bone-deep tiredness that I'd felt in the final years with George. I ended it with Arthur. I told him he was a lovely man, but I wasn't looking for a project. I was looking for a partner. Then came Julian, the judge. I mentioned him at the beginning. Julian was different. He was softer. He was lonely. He didn't demand things, he needed them. And for a woman like me, need is a dangerous word. To a caregiver, a man in need is like a siren song. You think, I can help him. I can make his life easier. It's just a few small things. But the small things are a trap. The turning point came during a weekend visit. Julian's daughter, Sarah, came over. She was in her 50s, and she looked exhausted. She was the one who usually handled Julian's affairs. I saw the way she looked at me when I was in the kitchen preparing a roast and organizing Julian's pillbox. She didn't look grateful. She looked relieved. She leaned over to me and whispered, "Oh, thank God you're here. I can finally have a weekend off." But then the loneliness crept in, and like so many women my age, I decided to try dating again. I was 71. I thought I was stepping into a new chapter, a chapter of companionship, of intellectual connection, of shared sunsets. But here is the lesson I had to learn the hard way. Many men of our generation don't enter retirement, they just look for a new employee. The first man I dated was Arthur. Arthur was a retired banker, polished and sophisticated. He took me to the opera. He spoke 4 languages. I thought I'd hit the jackpot. But within 2 months, the shift happened. It starts small. A comment like, "I can never find my keys. You're so much better at organizing than I am." Or, "I've never really known how to use the dishwasher. Would you mind showing me?" That sentence hit me like a bolt of lightning. I wasn't a romantic partner to Julian. I was a relief shift. I was a replacement worker. I was just the new person being hired to do the job Sarah didn't want to do anymore. I walked out of that kitchen and sat in my car for an hour. I cried. I didn't cry because I was sad. I cried because I was angry. I was angry that at 72 years old, I was still trying to prove my worth by how much I could do for others. I realized that for my entire life, I had been taught that being useful was the same thing as being loved. I believed that if I stopped being useful, I would be disposable. I had spent 40 years being the glue, and I had forgotten that glue doesn't have a life of its own. It just holds other things together. I broke up with Julian a week later. He was confused. He asked me, "What did I do wrong? I was kind to you. I never asked you for anything." And that was the point. He didn't have to ask. He just expected the space around him to be managed. He expected the world to be soft and clean and organized, and he didn't care who had to bleed to make it that way. I went home to my house, and I did something I had never done in my life. I stopped. I stopped organizing. I stopped anticipating. I stopped fixing things that weren't broken. I started a selfish list. I wrote it in a blue notebook. I can leave the dishes in the sink until tomorrow. I can spend 3 hours staring at the birds in the garden. I can eat a piece of chocolate for dinner if I feel like it. I can be useless and still be worthy of love. I started spending more time with my sisters and my friends. We started a no-service club. We go to lunch, and the rule is that no one is allowed to talk about who they are taking care of. We don't talk about our grandchildren's schedules or our husband's doctors. We talk about the books we're reading. We talk about the places we want to visit. We talk about ourselves. I am 76 years old. I live alone, and some people, especially my children, worry that I'm lonely. They ask, "Mom, don't you want some company? Don't you want someone to share your life with?" And I tell them, I am sharing my life with the most interesting person I've ever known, me. So if you are listening to this, and you are a woman who has spent your life being the invisible glue, if you are the one who remembers every birthday, who manages every crisis, who makes sure everyone is fed and happy while you starve for a moment of peace, I want you to hear me. You have spent your life building bridges for everyone else to walk across. It is okay to stop building. It is okay to let the laundry sit. It is okay to let someone else figure out where their keys are. If you decide to find love again, don't look for someone who tells you that you work magic in the kitchen. Look for someone who knows how to make the magic happen for themselves. Look for a man who can boil his own water, schedule his own appointments, and hold his own life together. Because the most beautiful relationship you will ever have is the one where you finally stop taking care of everyone else and start taking care of the woman in the mirror. My name is Eleanor Vance. I am no longer the glue. I am the whole damn picture.